Hello and welcome back to Tactics Board. The international break is finally over and Norwich City are back in championship action against Leeds at Carrow Road this weekend. So we're going to take a look at that game, the starting 11 that I predict David Wagner to choose and how I see the game panning out tactically. Of course, a lot of that will be down to former Canaries head coach Daniel Farke, and we're all very familiar with how he plays, of course, and he has adopted a similar strategy at Leeds, although he maybe has even better players than he had when he was at Norwich and they won 2 championship titles. So we're going to take a look at what Norwich probably need to look out for, how tactically they might set up to combat that famous Farke ball style, and see how I think the game is going to pan out. Of course, it looks like it's going to be a very difficult one. Leeds on the way up, they've only lost 1 of their last 9 league games, and Norwich on a little bit of a slide with their own momentum, but they've got players back from injury. Borja Sainz, Jakob Sorensen and Marcelino Nunez back in the fold after extended periods out injured. So that gives David Wagner some different elements to play with. Of course, still a problem up front without Ashley Barnes or Josh Sargent. We're going to get stuck into how I think he'll deal with that and the rest of the team. So without further ado, this is the 11 I think David Wagner will choose to face Leeds United. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Danny Bart at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, a midfield of Kenny McLean and Adam Forshaw on the right, Christian Fastnax on the left, Jonathan Rowe, with Adam Eder up front and Gabriel Sara just behind him. So to go from the back, I've gone for Gunn in goal. Pretty solid performance for Scotland, although they did lose 2-0 to Spain in the game that he played. But they've qualified for the Euros, so he'll be coming back to Colney with a smile on his face for sure, and very excited for the summer. But he's got a job to do at Norwich. And although I think he struggled at Plymouth in that 6-2 loss and maybe was struggling for form a little bit at a time, he now seems to be back on form, and he's been one of Norwich's most reliable players in the last couple of years. George Long hasn't really put too much of a foot wrong so far in a Norwich shirt, but he's still quite far off Angus Gunn in my book, and I'd be very surprised if he's replaced at any time in the near future. So I've got him in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, who also seems to be getting back to his best. Having watched back the Coventry game, I'm not sure it was up there with his top 2 or 3 Norwich performances, but it wasn't as disappointing as I think we've seen him play at times at Norwich. I think we need to see a little bit more consistency from him, especially from a 27-year-old. You expect to see a little bit more by way of consistency of performance, and I think Norwich can probably expect to see that with time. Of course, he's somebody who hadn't had a lot of game time when he came to Norwich, and that was why they were able to get him on a free after he was released by Bournemouth. But I think that game time is only going to help him, and similarly to Gunn, although Kellen Fisher has been admirable in sort of cup competitions and when he's been given a chance. I think he scored for the under-21s early in the international break actually. Jack Stacey still has that monopoly by quite some significant way, so I'd expect to see him start on the right. At centre-back, I've got Shane Duffy, who you won't be surprised to see in there. Started wherever possible, really, even in the Cups, and looked fairly solid for Ireland. Of course, they did struggle in their first game, but he did get a clean sheet when they beat Gibraltar 4-0 last time out, and he'll be coming back with a smile on his face, as well as Gunn, although Ireland are going to find it hard to qualify. I think that was the case going into the break, really, and they don't really find themselves in a much worse position than they were in. He'll be happy with his performance in that one, and I think aside from the Plymouth nightmare, he's been one of Norwich's best players, so I expect to see him in there. But of course, a lot of people will be expecting Ben Gibson to be dropped. A pretty inexplicable own goal against Coventry. There wasn't really anyone around him. Perhaps you could say Duffy or Gunn should have been shouting at him. Even Bart was on the pitch at that point, actually. Maybe somebody should have been clearer that he wasn't under any pressure and that he didn't need to head into his own net. But that was really a significant error from Gibson. And although Wagner went into the game speaking about how he likes consistency at the back, and he obviously went with that same duo, it's going to be really, really difficult for him to justify not bringing Bart in for this game. So I expect to see him on the left. It is a more marginal call than maybe some people will think it should be, however, because Wagner really has been super stubborn on that, and he's shown himself to be slightly stubborn at various times this season, actually. So I wouldn't be especially surprised to see Gibson in the team, but just marginally I'm going to say that surely Wagner can't ignore the pressure any longer and Bart will start. Similarly to Giannoulis, that seems like an inevitable change. Sam McCallum didn't do too badly against his former club in Norwich's last game before the international break, but Giannoulis is probably by far the better player and one of the most talented players in the Norwich squad. Went away with Greece, of course, so won't have been training with Wagner's first team group, but he didn't play a minute for his country, so there shouldn't be too much tiredness apart from maybe flying, but of course he was only in Europe, so not too many factors that should prevent him from playing. Of course, a little bit of a curveball that Wagner threw in there for the Coventry game, but I expect to see Giannoulis back in for this one. And then in midfield, I've gone for McLean and Forshaw, and this whole midfield mix is really going to play into the tactics of the game, and I'll come on to that when I speak about why I've got Sarah in that sort of number 10 role. But I think Forshaw is somebody who will obviously know these Leeds players, or some of these Leeds players. They've done quite a good amount of transfer business, but he will know a lot of these players and how they work. Somebody who will be very, very motivated to prove himself against Leeds. And although I think the fan base at Leeds generally see him as somebody who is a solid and reliable player and tidy on the ball, he probably still feels like he has some to prove after being released by the Yorkshire club. So I expect to see him in the team just about. Of course, a little bit of an error in the Swansea game. You can probably put that down to Duffy a little bit as well. And he does still look like somebody who's getting used to the pace of the game, having not played much over the last few years. But so far, his fitness is holding up. Wagner is a massive fan of his. And especially against a team of Leeds' calibre, I think he gives you a lot more solidity than, say, Sarah would in that position. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's in that role again. It's another marginal call in that midfield striker mix because of that sort of the mix between a number 10 and a striker, and he's gone with various different types of player in that position. That is a very fluid situation, especially without Barnes and Sargent in there. So that will be an interesting one to follow, but I think it would make sense for Forshaw to be in there. On the right, I've gone for Christian Fasnacht, who really struggled against Leicester, and from there hasn't really shown his best for the club, I don't think. Started really well in a Norwich shirt, but I've already seen people sort of calling his transfer into question, and I think that's a little bit harsh. He is somebody who's still adapting to the league and hit the ground running, and has now only just started playing in a team that really are struggling generally. It's not just him, but Wagner has gone with the Poeta solution quite a lot, and I think it's quite typical of the Pole's career at Norwich so far, to be honest, that he really impresses in the cup competitions, he impresses as a substitute, and then when he's given the chance from the start, I don't think we've seen too much from him in those two games. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Poeta dropped for Fasnacht, who's somebody that Wagner trusts quite a lot. You know, you could have said that there was a lot of games in a row for him to play, having come from Switzerland where they play fewer games, and at his age, I think he's 29 now, and somebody still adapting to the league, you could understand why Wagner might take him out of the spotlight a little bit and give him some time to rest. But he's now had that international break, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Christian Fasnacht back in the team. And on the right, Jonathan Rowe on the left, no real question about that, is there. Obviously scored for the England under-21s the other day, and he'll be delighted with that. Arguably Norwich's best performer so far this season, and I think it was an interesting time for a Todd Cantwell interview to come out, actually, because he was somebody who, maybe not by all accounts, but by a lot of accounts, maybe was slightly distracted by transfer speculation at one point. The first real strong speculation around Rowe has come out, linking him with Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, amongst others. So let's see if that sort of distracts him. He seems like a very level-headed individual, and somebody who has a fantastic attitude and looks very committed to the cause. So hopefully it doesn't. Just from what I know of him, you know, not too much, but just from what I know of him and what we've seen of him, it would make sense that he's someone with a level head who will just be keen to carry on his momentum, and that just keeps on rolling. As poorly as Norwich have played at times in recent weeks, he seems like somebody who isn't going to let his level drop, no matter the sort of team situation. So I think he can go and continue to prove it. I expect him absolutely to start, and if he doesn't, I think that will be a significant explanation for Wagner to try and make, because obviously he's been fantastic for Norwich so far this season. Hopefully he can keep that up. I've got him on the left. Adam Eder is the sort of classic number 9. I don't think there's much question around that after the start that Hwang Yu-jo has made in a Norwich City shirt. I think against Swansea he was probably a little bit hard done by. I thought he made some decent runs, and Gabriel Sara and others sort of struggled to find him at times, or picked the wrong pass, and he wasn't in a situation where he could go and score. He actually scored for his country, South Korea, in a 4-0 win the other day, so hopefully that gives him the confidence. But I think for now he hasn't really proved enough to start ahead of Ida, who of course is still the clear third choice up front for me, but you know, he's sort of the best solution Norwich have got at the moment, and I think he is sort of building it up. You know, we see that he's sort of a confidence player that needs a little bit of time and a few good games to get into a rhythm, and I think he's getting there slowly, maybe not as quick as Norwich would like, but I think he's getting there, and I think he's improving ever so slightly. So hopefully he can continue to do that against Leeds, and against the manager who gave him a chance, obviously, to start off with. Hopefully he can, in a way, prove Farke right, although I'm sure he wouldn't be very happy with that. And then the one where there's probably quite a lot of contention and where I'm not 100% sure is Sara up front. The reason why I've gone with that is because I think you will want Forshaw in the midfield. As I spoke about, he obviously offers a level of defensive protection that maybe some others don't. But also against a Daniel Farke side, you really need some energy in the press. And I think that's where Ida will really need to up his game in this fixture. And I think Gabriel Sara, as a more physical, imposing presence, who also has fantastic running statistics and can go all game really, that is quite a good duo for me to combat a Farke team. We saw over and over again when he was the Norwich head coach that it's such a fine balance, because if you don't get your press absolutely right, then that plays into a Farke team's hands so well, especially as a talented one as they are. They've obviously got Glenn Kamara in midfield, as well as Ethan Ampadu. At championship level, that is an insanely good midfield technically, and they can easily pass round a poor press. But the way that his team's set up, if you can expose them to a press and you can really put them under to an excellent level and really take the time away, then that's where a lot of the joy will come. I remember Burnley doing that against Norwich's team, and they weren't the only ones. That happened over and over again whenever it wasn't working for Farke really, and often when they struggled in the Premier League, it was because they tried to play out within the structure that he set out, and teams, when they press that well, and you have to do it well, can really find a way to hurt Farke teams. So that will be the way for Norwich to do it, I think, and that's why I've gone for Sara up there. But for Ida, it's so key that he improves that area of his game. I know it's asking a lot to improve it by a significant amount, sort of for one fixture, but it's one of the main weaknesses of his game, and one of the reasons why he's not up there with Barnes and Sargent in Wagner's system. He's got the physicality, he's got the size, he's got the pace, and he should have the athleticism most of the time. He's also an underrated technical footballer, but off the ball, I think, is where his work really needs to improve, and that was actually one of the weaknesses when he came into the team under Farke, having had the intensity of a press led by Teemu Pukki, who was a fantastic presser, especially when he was a little bit younger. Then when Adam Ida came in, I remember watching him in a game against Manchester United when they lost 4-0, and his role was to go and press hard, but he really struggled with that and really didn't show the intensity that Norwich needed in that game, and that was a big part of why they lost so heavily. So against a Farke team, it's going to be vitally important that Adam Ida improves that area of his game, and that the whole team is really in sync and good at that. And I think it may become slightly too soon for Sainz to come into the starting 11. Of course, he's not done that yet, and he did come off with an injury for the under-21s. We expect him to be in the mix, but I don't expect him to start. But he maybe from the bench is somebody who could go and do that, albeit his teammates will be tired and maybe they won't be able to do it tactically as a team, because you obviously need to do that as a whole. But I think in future, Sainz is a Wagner player who will really help with that. But from the start, those players really need to be on it, and they need to be intelligent, and they need to be physical and quick and fit to be able to combat this Farke team. Because having looked at their team in preparation for this video, it is a fantastic team at championship level. I think they've gone under the radar a little bit because they started so poorly, but they're really coming up now and rising through the table very quickly, and you can see why when you look at their squad. They've got Joel Pirot, who of course thrived for Swansea before signing for Leeds for, I believe, over £10 million this summer, and he's in that sort of Steeperman role, but with a few more goals. He's already scored 5 in 8 appearances for Leeds, and he's the more physical presence up front for them, sort of in that Steeperman role, as I said, but I don't want to say gets into the box more, because Steeperman did sort of do that, but he is more of your traditional striker, and Farke has probably deployed a more traditional man in that role than you might see as a sort of striker in terms of a traditional number 10. We know those don't really exist in a Farke system, but they will have those dangerous players coming off the sides. Obviously, Somerville, Jayden Anthony on loan from Bournemouth. There's excellent players all over the park really for Leeds. So I think if Norwich, to be honest, this is quite negative, but if Norwich manage to leave the game with a point, having been in the rut that they have in the last few weeks, I think they will be delighted with that, and hopefully that keeps them in the mix, because they're 7th at the moment, but so many teams are so close points-wise that they could really drop quickly if they lose that form. But it'll be an interesting one to follow. Of course, the Farke element gives it an added little layer of spice, and tactically it makes it a much more interesting one as well, because Norwich fans will recognise how both teams set up. So it'll be an interesting one, hopefully an entertaining one, and hopefully Norwich can get things back on track with a good result. Thank you very much for joining me on Tactics Ball. We've got plenty of other good preview content across this channel, and of course at pinkun.com. You can subscribe for $1.99 for the first 2 months, and then $2.99 thereafter, which I think, of course I'm very biased, but I think is fantastic value. So go over there for subscriber exclusive columns, Q&As, audio, video, all the stuff that you need. And of course we'll be at Carrow Road covering every kick. So pinkun.com is the place to be. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.